Balancing on a natural limestone ridge above the river, the town of Dole, France, is a lovely old city north of the Jura Mountains. Holy Roman emperors and counts of Burgundy have stayed in this majestic region. The center of Dole is a confusion of alleyways and narrow stairwells edged by Renaissance homes with turrets and beautiful courtyards. The birthplace of Louis Pasteur, the famous French biologist. Sweeping forests are Dole's picturesque backyard. The history of Dole, France today resonates with bygone trades and historians. As with a lot of history, it's not always pretty, and the freedoms we often take for granted were hard fought. Some of these people were a lot like us, just trying to make their way through their short time on this earth. Others though, were awarded great power over people, and the formula created some of the most evil leaders ever known. And one may dare say, some were also sadistic and tyrannical. Their quests were often selfish and led to the gross misuse of power. Egotists who saw no value below themselves and killed with no mercy. This is the story of Charles d'Amboise, who led a raid and subsequent massacre on the residents of Dole, France. May 25th, 1479, unequivocally became the day all contemporary chronicles designated as a day of unimaginable death. Never was there a more abominable massacre ever seen. Never had there been more blood, brains, and innards scattered throughout a city's streets. On this day, at 6 o'clock in the morning, as the sun was rising, the sleepy inhabitants of Dole were in for an awful awakening. They had already been under siege for 3 months by the royal troops, so the oppression was already being felt. Suddenly, the people heard a great rumbling and a great fracas. A group of soldiers had just penetrated their city walls by means of ruse and felony, and they were coming. The portcullis was immediately raised by these traitors, who were bribed, and the main drawbridge was lowered. The favorite residence of the Duke of Burgundy was forfeited and delivered to the invading soldiers of King Louis the 11th, who ordered the ambush. The targets were citizens, not soldiers, and not prepared for any kind of battle. Trembling with abject fear inside their homes, the Deloy heard the pounding of horse hoofs and clicking of armor. Then, amidst all the foray, a terrifying voice was raised above the din and roared, "Kill them all!" Absolutely terrified, most of the residents went to hide in their cellars. A few, however, wanted to see their enemy and see the face of the man who was condemning them all to sudden death. Bravely sneaking to their windows, some covertly spied a certain cavalier rider outside, with glittering eyes through his armor, and sitting astride his horse. He was vehemently inciting his men to carnage. This event is how the Deloy saw, for the first time, the diabolical prince, who was known throughout the land for his savage bloodlust and insane killing. King Louis XI was known as Louis the Prudent, the Cunning, or the Spider King, for spinning his web to snare his enemies and taking lives by any measure to expand. This human beast was a favorite weapon of the Spider King. His name was Charles d'Amboise, but he was known as Charles the Satanic, and only havoc and hatred stayed on his mind. Traveling through the unknown streets of Dole, upon his black horse, screaming his calls for death, he soon made his arrival to the Notre Dame Church. He was met by a handful of newly positioned Deloitte archers who were attempting to defend themselves and their city. At seeing their attempt, d'Amboise just laughed and roared,
"Kill them! Kill them all! I want to see the blood of peasant archers flow like a river in the streets of Dole. Go on, kill them! Kill them all!"
And the horrid butchery continued. When swords were broken, they slit throats with knives, stabbed, crushed, strangled. Soon, there was no one left to exterminate. So then, the unabashed leader started attacking the cadavers. This appalling work amused him. Roaring with laughter, he cried out,
"Look at them! Just look at those disgusting earthworms!"
While he was busy with his 20th decapitation, a soldier approached to inform him that a group of Deloitte was discovered still taking refuge inside a house. A sinister sneer appeared on his face as he was ready to rush over and massacre them, but an evil expression crossed his face.
"Leave them. Leave them there to breed. They'll give us some little ones that we can take pleasure in coming to kill in several years."
On the following day, and those that followed, Charles would continue to burn villages, rape, and kill the unfortunate. His obsession with sadistic murdering of innocents, caught unaware, caused many to say he was
possessed by the angel of pure evil.
Yes, he is the devil. His personal toll was in the hundreds. Throughout that entire spring of 1479 and into the next autumn, he untiringly killed with a wolf's smile. Winter brought him back to the side of his friend and king, Louis. He was promoted to counselor and governor of Bourgogne. As soon as the harsh winter passed, d'Amboise resumed his search for blood. At the end of a successful year, he decided to settle into his castle, the Château de Chemonchois. However, once they reached Tours, he was suddenly struck down by illness. He was transported to a nearby manor, retired to bed, and what's described as a fetid perspiration flowed from his every pore. Charles d'Amboise let out horrible, plaintive cries. Doctors came to examine him, but were sworn at and cursed. He continued to anguish in pain. His body twisting on the bed, as if he were becoming the prey of burning flames. He finally entered an agony so strange, so unnatural, that the people who approached him did not stop making the sign of the cross. He emitted appalling, inhuman cries, described as sick horses, and sometimes the cries of a pig being slaughtered.
I can't breathe!
He roared blasphemously, insulted God, swore at saints, and said sacrilegious utterances about the Virgin Mary. He cursed the Pope, to the consternation of those present. It is seriously thought he was indeed possessed by a demon. So monks came to exorcise him. Finally, after almost a month enduring his suffering, Charles d'Amboise, the devil, died from heavy convulsions that almost threw him from the bed. He died with such a revolting expression on his face that no one was expected to stay with his cadaver, which was customary. They went to bury him 3 days later. For being one of the highest dignitaries in the kingdom, a solemn funeral was held inside the church of the Cordeliers d'Amboise. In attendance are the Bishop d'Albe, the dead man's brother, princes, metered abbots, and penitents of the church in hoods.
God the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
A cordaire said the Mass for the dead at the altar. Suddenly, at the moment of consecration, the monk begins to gesticulate. All present are astounded by seeing him wave his arms, as if pushing something away, or something invisible, something evil. The terrified monk takes a run up and down the steps, uncoordinated and stumbling. Then he stops, and with his back to the tabernacle, he screams a blood-curdling scream. It was as if clamorous voices were in his ear, and he was the only one who could hear them at first. Finally, a strange voice booms and echoes through the church rafters.
Stop, priest. Your mass is useless. It has no meaning. This man is already with me, body and soul. Why bother blessing an empty coffin? For this coffin is empty. Empty!
The Corlay sees before him a grimacing face. Trembling and angry, he makes the sign of the cross. He continued to ascend the altar steps and proceeded to the catafalque. He then cried out, "Open this coffin!" Bishop d'Albe immediately asked for an explanation. "Open this coffin. I will only continue the Mass after being certain that the body of Lord d'Amboise is really inside of it." The guards removed the mortuary sheet and opened the coffin. To their sheer mortification, the coffin was empty. Everyone reacted in a panic and ran toward the door to flee. and never was the body of Charles d'Amboise ever found. This story can be found in many works for documentation, but there has never been any explanation. His body was never found. There is a theory that the body was kidnapped by Charles d'Ambroise's enemies, whether they were parents of the unfortunate inhabitants of the Siege of Dole, or of lords despoiled by Louis's counselors. This could have been done so that Charles d'Amboise would be damned by preventing him from benefiting from the religious ceremony called absolution, or a burial in holy ground. The thing that remains inexplicable is that the Courtelet asked that the coffin be opened, for it is very certain that, if the body had been removed by Charles's enemies, these people did not go to the monk to tell him about it, even in confession. But there is another hypothesis. It could be supposed that someone who had knowledge of the kidnapper's secret hid behind the altar and spoke to the Courtelet monk, who, troubled and appalled, thought to have had himself a vision. But this is only a theory. So, the conclusion is an enormous question mark. But what we do know is all the suffering and untimely deaths this man was responsible for. How he was so unmerciful. How could one be surprised by his strange agony at the point of his own death? Perhaps his demons came early to torment him and carried away not only his dark soul, but his body as well. I can usually humanize most anyone in the stories I tell here, but I see no redeeming evidence of retribution for Charles d'Amboise, if all records are correct. Just maybe, if he's allowed to dwell upon this earth again, I can only hope he is a changed man.